Kale stood on the observation deck of the human starship Odyssey, his eyes tracing the swirling colors of the Velithian orbital hub below. It was a marvel of alien architecture, a structure suspended in space like a floating jewel. Spires of crystal shimmered in the light of a distant sun, while massive docking bays hummed with the activity of ships from countless worlds. To Kale, it was beautiful, but he felt no awe, only determination. Humans had come far, and he had a mission to complete. At 19, he was young by human standards, but he carried a calm that belied his age. Kyle was not here to impress with charm or force. He was here as an envoy, a representative of humanity, tasked with negotiating trade treaties and forging the first steps of diplomacy with the Velithian Empire. For centuries, humans had been a small and isolated species, mostly unknown to the galactic community. Yet in recent decades, humans had proven themselves adaptable, resourceful, and above all, resilient. The doors to the observation deck hissed open, and a Velithian aide entered, bowing slightly. "Envoy Kale, the royal court awaits your arrival. The young heir will meet you shortly." The aide's voice carried a musical tone, almost melodic, but beneath it was a faint edge of amusement. Kale nodded. "Lead the way." The corridor they walked down was lined with holographic panels showing images of the Velithian royal family and historical events. Kyle studied them carefully. The Velithians were known for their flamboyance, their obsession with youth and beauty, and their sharp intellects. He had read about their culture extensively. Velithians prided themselves on wit and cunning, often insulting newcomers to test them. Kale expected as much. When they arrived at the throne chamber, the room opened into a grand expanse of white and gold. At the center, raised on a platform of crystal, sat the young royal heir, Lithera. She was only 19, a figure of elegance and poise, with pale violet skin and hair that seemed to shimmer like liquid amethyst. Her eyes, sharp and piercing, assessed Kale immediately. "Ah," she said, her voice melodic, but laced with subtle mockery. "The human envoy arrives. Tell me, do humans always travel so cautiously? Or is this fear of grandeur something new?" Kale paused, measuring his response. There was no malice in his eyes, only calm awareness. He did not bow, did not smile, did not reply. Instead, he remained standing, his posture straight, his gaze steady. The court murmured. A few Velithian nobles laughed quietly, expecting the human to flinch to make some attempt at flattery, but Kale did nothing. Lithera's eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting," she said. "I expected a species so primitive to respond with either submission or anger, yet here you are doing nothing." Kyle still did not respond. He only looked at her with quiet intensity, a subtle confidence that seemed to fill the room. It was not arrogance, it was restraint. "Perhaps," she continued, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips, "humans are more curious than I was led to believe, or perhaps too proud to recognize their own smallness." This time, Kale allowed a slight shift in his stance, a small, deliberate step backward. Without a word, he turned. The sound of his boots echoed in the vast chamber as he walked toward the exit. The courtiers gasped. The young royal blinked, stunned. A human had refused to engage in her game. The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the royal court in silence. For a long moment, Lithera stared at the empty space where the human had stood. She had expected fear, flattery, or at least a witty retort, but none of these had come. Kyle returned to the ship's observation deck, taking a deep breath. He had accomplished the first step, not by words, not by cleverness, but by demonstrating human restraint. It was a small victory, but it mattered. Across the galaxy, humans were still underestimated. Every moment like this was a reminder that humans had something the Velithians often lacked: patience, dignity, and the courage to walk away when treated unfairly. Later, as Kale reviewed his notes in the quiet of his cabin, he considered the young heir. Lithera was clever, sharp, and arrogant, but predictable. Velithians valued intellect above all, but their pride often blinded them. Kyle smiled faintly. Understanding an enemy, or a potential ally, was half the battle. He spent the next hours preparing. Tomorrow he would begin the official negotiations. It would be a test of wit and strategy, of diplomacy and human resilience. He reviewed the Velithian customs carefully, their obsession with youth, their tendency to mock and test, their reliance on spectacle to assert superiority. Kale understood one thing clearly: humans did not need to imitate them. Humans succeeded because of their differences. When Kale slept that night, he dreamt not of alien courts or grand chambers, but of earth, forests, oceans, mountains, and the quiet strength of people who had survived against impossible odds. He remembered his training, his mentors, the stories of human ingenuity. In his heart, he carried not fear, but a quiet confidence. Humans had endured far worse than arrogance from alien royalty. The next morning, Kale returned to the Velithian hub, ready to engage in the next phase. He moved with deliberate calm through the corridors, observing the bustling activity of the alien empire. Servants glided silently, droids scuttled along the floors, and holographic displays flashed messages in languages Kyle barely recognized. Yet through all of this, he remained focused. The young heir, Lithera, awaited him in a smaller council chamber this time. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and perhaps a hint of irritation. Kale entered and again made no gesture of submission. "I expected you to sulk, human," Lithera said, leaning slightly forward, "or perhaps to argue. But you remain unmoved." Kale's response was quiet, but firm. "I am here to negotiate, not to trade insults." The words carried weight, not defiance, not fear, but clarity. Lithera raised an eyebrow. Humans were unusual. They did not react as the Velithians anticipated. They did not flinch, nor did they fawn. They simply acted, with purpose. The council watched in silence, realizing that the young human was not just another delegate. He was something different, resilient, clever, and unshakable. Lithera, for the first time, felt a spark of genuine interest. Perhaps this human was not so small after all. Kyle, meanwhile, took careful notes. He had observed more in the past, hours than any Velithian could imagine. Subtle gestures, social cues, and the hidden tensions of the court. He understood that arrogance could be a weakness if wielded against it correctly. As the meeting concluded, Kyle left once more without unnecessary words, allowing silence to speak for him. The Velithian court would not forget this human who refused to respond to insult. Across the empire, whispers would spread of a species that was quiet but unyielding, small, yet filled with potential. Kyle returned to his ship, ready for the days ahead. The journey had only just begun. He knew that challenges would come, tests would be laid, and insults would be made. Yet Kale also knew that humanity thrived not by submission or aggression alone, but by resilience, intelligence, and the courage to maintain dignity when others sought to diminish it. The human envoy, Kyle, spent the next hours aboard the Odyssey, watching the bustling activity of the Velithian orbital hub from the observation deck. Ships from countless worlds glided past in silent arcs, docking at massive platforms that shimmered under artificial light. Kale's eyes were sharp, taking in every detail: the movements of the Velithian courtiers, the guards stationed at every doorway, and the subtle patterns of the alien society he had entered. Humans were often underestimated, even in the interstellar community. Many species assumed that humans were simple, reactive, and predictable. Kale understood why. They judged humans by size, technology, and military power. But humans were different. They adapted, they observed, and they endured. Even now, he was using that human advantage to understand the Velithians better than they realized. The first encounter with Lithera had already shaken the young heir. Kyle's refusal to answer the insult in the royal chamber had created a ripple across the court. Courtiers whispered among themselves, speculating about this human who did not flinch, who did not bow. who had walked away from the royal insult with unshakable calm. It was unheard of in Velithian history. In her private chambers, Lithra paced. Her violet eyes, sharp and calculating, followed Kale's departure from the chamber repeatedly in her mind. Normally, her mockery worked. She expected submission, anger, or clever retorts. But Kyle had shown none of these reactions. Instead, he had left silently, a quiet statement of dignity that no Velithian insult had ever evoked. "I must see this human again," she said softly, almost to herself. "There is something unusual about him." Meanwhile, Kale reviewed his notes, careful to track the Velithian customs he had observed. He wrote down the hierarchy of the royal court, the patterns of communication among the nobles, and subtle clues about Lithra herself. She was intelligent but prideful. She tested others because she expected superiority and submission. But Kale had seen a flaw. Arrogance often blinded the Velithians to observation and reasoning. The next day, Kale received an invitation to a private council meeting. He expected tests. Velithians enjoyed them, but he remained calm. As he entered the chamber, he noticed subtle changes from the last meeting. The room was smaller, more intimate, with fewer courtiers and more elaborate displays of Velithian technology. Holographic panels floated in the air, showing the political history of the empire. Lithra was seated at the center, her expression unreadable. "Welcome back, human," she said. "I see that your species has learned the art of silence." Kyle bowed slightly, not in submission but as a gesture of respect for the formalities of the meeting. "I am here to observe and understand, Your Highness," he replied, his voice calm and deliberate. The young heir tilted her head, studying him closely. "Observe and understand? Most delegates seek only to impress or appease. You, however, seem different." Kale's eyes did not waver. "Humans succeed through understanding, not through empty gestures or arrogance." A faint murmur ran through the remaining courtiers, but Lithra ignored them. She had already noticed that Kale's composure was extraordinary. He was not easily provoked, nor did he react according to expectation. It was a rare combination of intelligence, patience, and restraint, qualities that humans were quietly renowned for. The meeting began. Lithra posed a series of seemingly simple questions about human society, technology, and culture. Most were designed to trip Kale, revealing weaknesses or gaps in knowledge. But Kale answered carefully, never overreaching, never appearing arrogant. His responses were precise, logical, and honest. "Curious," Lithra murmured after one particularly detailed answer about human diplomacy. "Your species seems so young, yet you possess wisdom beyond your years." Kale inclined his head slightly. "Experience is not only measured in years, Your Highness. Humans learn quickly from mistakes and adapt to survive." Lithra's eyes narrowed. She had expected hesitation or uncertainty, but Kale spoke with quiet confidence. The courtiers exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. Humans were different. Humans were unpredictable in ways that challenged Velithian assumptions. After the meeting, Kyle walked through the corridors of the hub, observing. Servants moved silently, carrying trays of food and intricate artifacts. Guards remained alert, their movements precise and disciplined. Kale noticed patterns, how information traveled, how the nobles positioned themselves, and how the young royal tested both subordinates and guests. Every detail was a clue. Every observation built a larger picture. He also noticed the whispers. Across the hub, aliens were speaking of the human who refused to answer the royal insult. In some circles they spoke with admiration, in others with disbelief. The reputation of humans as meek or primitive was slowly being challenged. Kyle understood the subtle power of perception. Humans did not need to boast. They could let actions and composure speak for them. Later, Kale found himself in the hub's archives, studying historical records. Velithians had a long and proud history, but it was filled with examples of internal arrogance leading to failure. Kale noted patterns of overconfidence, overextension, and underestimation of other species. Humanity had survived through collaboration, innovation, and resilience. If humans applied these same principles in interstellar politics, they could achieve remarkable influence without resorting to aggression. Back in the royal court, Lithra struggled with an unfamiliar sensation. Curiosity, Kyle's silence, and composure had piqued her interest. Most species sought her approval or they reacted with anger, but Kale's restraint was like a mirror, reflecting qualities she rarely considered: patience, dignity, and subtle strength. Over the next several days, Kale continued his observations and subtle interactions with the court. He noticed a hierarchy among the nobles, the subtle tensions between factions, and the way Lithra relied on public perception to maintain authority. Every observation added to his understanding. He did not challenge the heir openly, but he gathered information that would be invaluable for future negotiations. One evening, while reviewing his notes, Kale reflected on the human advantage. Humans were not the strongest species in terms of raw power, nor the fastest or most technologically advanced. But humans had something Velithians often lacked: resilience, adaptability, and moral consistency. Even in the face of insult, Kale had remained calm, refusing to react emotionally. That small act had already changed perceptions among the Velithian court. Lithra, meanwhile, consulted with her advisors. "This human is unlike any other species we have encountered," she admitted. "He does not play our games, yet he is not foolish. There is something in him that we cannot predict." Her advisors nodded cautiously. Humans were known but rarely considered a serious challenge. Kale had already disrupted that expectation. Lithra realized that humans were not merely young, primitive beings. They were a species with potential far beyond what the Velithians had assumed. The following day, Kale was invited to a private demonstration of Velithian culture, a series of intellectual and strategic games designed to test delegates. Lithra watched intently, curious to see if he would falter. But Kale approached each challenge with calm observation, analyzing patterns, predicting outcomes, and making strategic choices that impressed even the most skeptical courtiers. Each success, however small, was a quiet statement of human capability. Kale did not boast or show superiority. He merely acted with clarity and intelligence, allowing his abilities to speak for themselves. By the end of the demonstration, murmurs filled the hall. Humans, it seemed, were far more capable than the Velithians had imagined. Kale had not merely survived the challenges, he had excelled through observation, reasoning, and strategic thinking. Lithra's curiosity deepened. She realized that Kale's strength lay not in physical ability or flashy technology, but in subtle intelligence and unshakable composure. These were qualities that humans had cultivated over millennia, shaped by a world of challenges and survival against overwhelming odds. Kale returned to the Odyssey once more, quietly taking note of what he had learned. The Velithians were clever, but their pride could be used against them. Their arrogance often led them to underestimate others. Humans thrived in such situations, not by force, but through careful observation, strategy, and resilience. As Kale looked out at the endless expanse of space, he understood that this was only the beginning. The Velithians were powerful, but humans had qualities that no arrogance could erase: intelligence, patience, adaptability, and quiet dignity. In time, Kale thought, humans would prove that strength came not only from power, but from understanding, restraint, and the courage to stand firm, even in the face of insult. The next morning, Kale stepped onto the polished floors of the Velithian council hall, his mind sharp and focused. Today would be different. The young heir, Lithra, had been unusually quiet since their last encounters, and that silence held a certain weight. Kale understood it well. It was the calm before a test. The hall was grand, even by Velithian standards. High ceilings arched like crystalline waves, reflecting soft light that bathed the room in gold and violet hues. Around him, courtiers arranged themselves in clusters, whispering in their melodic tongues. Kale's presence caused a quiet stir. He was no ordinary envoy, and the Velithians knew it. Lithera sat at the head of the hall, her posture straight, her violet eyes glinting with a mixture of curiosity and challenge. "Human Kale," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "I am curious how long your species can remain composed under pressure." Kale inclined his head slightly. "I do not seek confrontation, Your Highness. I only act with clarity and purpose." A ripple of amusement ran through the courtiers. Most delegates would have flinched, offended, or tried to match her sharp words with clever retorts. But Kale's calm, precise demeanor was a puzzle, and that intrigued the young heir. Lithera stood and gestured toward a large holographic table that shimmered with projections. "Then let us begin," she said. "You will face a series of challenges. Each is designed to test your intellect, your strategy, and your adaptability. Failure is expected." Kale studied the table. The first challenge was a simulation of a Velithian political negotiation. A holographic council debated fiercely over territory and resources, and Kale was tasked with guiding his faction to a favorable outcome. The simulation was complex, with dozens of variables and unpredictable elements. Most delegates would have been overwhelmed. Kyle began by observing the patterns. He noted the tendencies of each holographic figure, their biases, and their likely reactions. Slowly, deliberately, he moved his pieces, negotiating subtly, finding compromise where it was necessary and asserting strategy where it mattered. By the end of the simulation, his faction had secured a balanced and advantageous outcome, without any aggressive moves. A murmur of surprise ran through the court. Humans were not expected to succeed at such intricate simulations, but Kyle had done so with quiet efficiency. Lithera's lips curved slightly. "Impressive," she said, though her tone remained formal, "but this is only the beginning." The second challenge was physical, though not in the way humans might imagine. Velithians valued agility and precision over brute strength. Holographic mazes appeared around Kale, filled with shifting obstacles, sensors, and puzzles. The goal was to reach a central point while avoiding detection. Kale paused, analyzing the patterns of the sensors. He noticed a rhythm in their activation, a predictable timing that could be exploited. Using careful observation and precise movements, he navigated the maze with minimal errors, surprising the spectators who had expected him to struggle. Once again, Lithera's curiosity deepened. Here was a human who could match Velithians at their own games, not with arrogance but with quiet calculation. The third challenge was social. Kyle was placed among a group of holographic Velithian nobles, each programmed to provoke him with insults, false statements, or attempts to manipulate. The goal was to negotiate a treaty that benefited both sides, all while maintaining credibility and composure. Kyle approached each interaction calmly. He listened carefully, asked clarifying questions, and responded with tact and precision. At no point did he react to insults, nor did he allow deception to influence his decisions. By the end of the exercise, the holographic nobles acknowledged his success, a simulation of respect that mirrored the impression he was creating in the real court. Lithera leaned forward, intrigued. "You adapt quickly," she said softly. "Your species seems unpredictable. Cleverness, restraint, and the ability to anticipate. Rare traits." Kale's response was measured. "Humans survive by observing, learning, and adapting. It is a matter of necessity." The court fell silent. Many Velithians prided themselves on intellect and cunning, but they often underestimated the depth of human adaptability. Kale's words, simple yet truthful, struck a chord. Lithera decided to escalate the challenge. She summoned a final test, one designed to be nearly impossible. A combination of strategy, intellect, and diplomacy that required anticipating the actions of multiple factions, each with competing interests. The simulation was complex, filled with variables designed to confuse and overwhelm. Kale studied the table carefully. He began by mapping the factions, noting each group's priorities, weaknesses, and likely reactions. Unlike most participants, he did not rush. He thought several moves ahead, predicting not only the immediate consequences but also long-term effects. As the simulation progressed, Kale demonstrated human ingenuity. He created alliances that were mutually beneficial, anticipated betrayals before they occurred, and used subtle tactics to maintain balance and fairness. By the end, the simulation showed a result that exceeded even the Velithian designer's expectations. A stable and prosperous outcome for all factions. The room erupted in whispered astonishment. Velithians were skilled and intelligent, but Kale had exceeded their expectations not through raw intellect alone, but through patience, observation, and strategic thinking. Qualities humans had refined over millennia. Lithera remained seated, her expression unreadable, but her eyes glinting. With newfound respect, she realized that Kale's strength lay not in dominance or aggression but in understanding. He saw the larger picture, acted with clarity, and maintained integrity while achieving success. "You are unlike any delegate we have hosted," she said finally. "Your species is young, yet your mind is sharp. You do not react with pride, anger, or deception. Instead, you observe, calculate, and act with purpose. It is unusual." Kyle inclined his head. "Humans survive through understanding, cooperation, and adaptability. We do not rely solely on strength or intimidation. We act with reason and strategy." Lithera paused, considering his words. She had grown up in a culture that valued brilliance and spectacle, often dismissing patience and quiet calculation as weakness. Yet here was a human who embodied those very qualities, and had proven them superior in practice. Over the following days, Kale continued his engagements with the Velithian court. Each interaction tested him in new ways: subtle debates, strategic games, and complex negotiations. Always he remained composed, measured, and observant. Every success, every subtle victory, built the quiet reputation of humanity within the Tiar Empire. Whispers spread across the hub. Humans previously considered insignificant were gaining recognition, not through force nor by arrogance, but through intelligence, adaptability, and moral consistency. Kale's presence alone began to change perceptions, challenging centuries of assumption about humanity's place in the galaxy. Lithera, meanwhile, found herself thinking more about the human envoy than she cared to admit. He was not only clever, but patient and unwavering, a combination she had rarely encountered. His silence in the face of insult, his calm in the midst of challenge, and his subtle brilliance had created an unexpected tension in her perception. Finally, after another round of complex challenges, Kale was granted a private audience with Lithera. The court had gathered, curious to see the interaction between the human and the young royal. "You have proven yourself," Lithera said, her tone softer than before. "Most species would have faltered, offended, or failed. Yet you excel, without arrogance, without deceit." Kale's gaze was steady. "It is not excellence that matters, Your Highness. It is integrity, patience, and the willingness to understand." Lithera studied him for a long moment. She had expected cleverness, wit, and perhaps flattery, but Kale offered none of these. Instead, he offered qualities that the Velithians often overlooked: quiet strength, reason, and moral clarity. "You are remarkable," she said finally, almost reluctantly. "Perhaps humans are not as primitive as many believe. Perhaps your species has qualities we have ignored." Kale inclined his head, acknowledging the observation but offering no words of triumph. His victories were quiet. His respect was earned, not demanded. As he left the chamber, Kale reflected on the challenges he had faced. Each test, each simulation, each observation had been an opportunity to demonstrate human qualities: intelligence, patience, adaptability, and dignity. Humans did not need to boast. They allowed actions to speak for themselves. The morning sun of the Velithian orbital hub reflected off the crystal spires, painting the council halls in shades of gold and violet. Kyle walked through the corridors with a steady pace, calm and measured, as if he belonged in this alien world. His previous successes had not gone unnoticed. Across the Empire, Whispers about the human envoy who remained composed under insult, who mastered complex challenges and who outwitted simulations had begun to circulate. But Kale did not think about reputation. He thought about strategy, observation, and understanding. Every detail of the Velithian court could become a tool, or a trap. Today, he would begin the negotiations that could secure humanity's first significant foothold in interstellar diplomacy. Lithera awaited him in the Grand Council chamber, her violet eyes sharp and focused. Today she seemed less aloof, her usual arrogance tempered by curiosity and perhaps a hint of admiration. "Human Kale," she said, her tone measured, "you have proven capable in games and simulations. But diplomacy is more subtle. It requires foresight, compromise, and insight. Are you ready?" Kyle inclined his head slightly. "I am ready, Your Highness." The room was filled with representatives from various Velithian factions. Each had their own agenda, their own hidden motives, and their own pride to protect. Most would have assumed that humans were insignificant, yet Kale had already proven otherwise. Now his skill would be tested in a setting where words and strategy mattered more than simulations. Lithera began with a simple opening, a trade agreement that had been under discussion for years. It involved rare minerals from a distant asteroid belt and access to human technology that could assist Velithian agriculture. Many delegates viewed it as a routine negotiation. But Kale knew that every detail mattered: the balance of power, the subtle concessions, the perception of respect and fairness. Kyle listened carefully as the factions argued. Some demanded concessions, others sought dominance. The room was tense, filled with veiled threats and subtle manipulation. Kyle observed every gesture, every facial expression, every nuance of tone. Then, when the moment was right, he began to speak. His words were calm, precise, and firm. He proposed solutions that balanced competing interests, offered fair compromises, and highlighted long-term benefits rather than short-term victories. He did not dominate the conversation but guided it, subtly influencing the decisions of others. The Velithians were stunned. Most delegates expected humans to be either submissive or overly aggressive. Kale's quiet confidence, strategic thinking, and moral clarity created a ripple of surprise across the chamber. The human envoy was not merely participating, he was shaping the outcome. Lithera watched him closely. She had seen cleverness before, even brilliance. But Kale's approach was different. He combined intelligence with patience, observation with action, and subtlety with clear purpose. For the first time she felt challenged, not in ego or pride, but in her understanding of what humans could accomplish. As the negotiation progressed, Kyle noticed a faction attempting to manipulate the agreement in their favor by presenting misleading information about mineral quantities. He countered tactfully, questioning assumptions, presenting data clearly, and allowing the evidence to speak for itself. In a few subtle moves, he shifted the balance of the negotiation, ensuring fairness without overt confrontation. By the end of the session, a historic agreement was reached. Humans would gain access to the mineral resources, while Velithians would receive technology and expertise that strengthened their own systems. It was a balanced, mutually beneficial outcome, a rare achievement in Velithian politics. The chamber erupted in quiet murmurs of astonishment. Many had expected conflict, intrigue, or failure. Instead, the human envoy had achieved cooperation and fairness where others might have sought personal advantage. Lithera stood, her gaze fixed on Kale. "You have exceeded expectations," she admitted, her voice carrying a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Your species is unlike any we have encountered. You act with clarity, patience, and fairness. And yet you achieve results that even the most seasoned Velithian strategists would envy." Kyle inclined his head. "It is not only strategy that matters, Your Highness. Cooperation, understanding, and ethical consideration are as important as intelligence or cunning." The young heir's expression softened. She realized that Kale was not simply clever. He embodied principles the Velithians often overlooked. Humans did not seek glory or dominance, they sought understanding, balance, and progress. In this they were surprisingly powerful. In the days that followed, Kale's role grew. He was invited to advise on further negotiations, to consult on strategic alliances, and even to mediate disputes among factions. Each time he remained composed, thoughtful, and patient. Every action reinforced a simple truth. Humans thrived not through aggression but through intelligence, empathy, and moral clarity. Lithera, too, began to change. Her initial pride and arrogance were gradually tempered by respect for the human envoy. She observed him not as a subordinate or a curiosity but as a peer, a representative of a species that had long been underestimated. One evening, Lithera summoned Kale to a private meeting. The room was quiet, bathed in soft violet light. "Human. Kale," she said, her tone serious, "I must admit something. I underestimated your species. I expected arrogance, weakness, or unpredictability. Yet you consistently demonstrate clarity, patience, and intelligence. You think beyond immediate gain, beyond pride. You consider long-term consequences and fairness. It is unusual." Kyle met her gaze calmly. "Humanity has survived by adapting, learning, and understanding. We value intelligence, cooperation, and perseverance. These are traits that allow us to endure challenges, even when others doubt us." Lithera leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "You are not only clever, but principled. Most would exploit weaknesses for short-term advantage. You, however, act with integrity while achieving results. It is remarkable." Kyle allowed a faint smile. "Results without integrity are temporary. Humans believe that lasting success requires both strategy and ethics." The young heir remained silent, considering his words. For the first time, she acknowledged the possibility that humans might not be primitive or weak. They were different, and in their differences lay strength that the Velithians had overlooked. Over the next weeks, Kale continued to negotiate, mediate, and advise. He became a symbol of human capability and moral clarity, subtly influencing Velithian politics and earning respect across factions. Even the most skeptical nobles began to recognize that humans were not to be dismissed. Lithera observed his every action, noting how he combined strategy with ethics, patience with decisiveness, and observation with action. She realized that Kale was not merely a skilled envoy. He represented something greater, the potential of an entire species to influence, adapt, and thrive. The turning point was clear. Humans had begun to earn genuine respect within the Velithian Empire, not through force, not through arrogance, but through intelligence, moral clarity, and the courage to act with dignity. Kale had demonstrated that humanity could match and sometimes exceed the abilities of even the most confident and powerful alien species. One evening, as Kale prepared to leave the council chambers, Lithera approached him quietly. "Human, Kale," she said softly. "I will not insult you, nor will I test you unnecessarily. You have proven your worth. Your species has potential I had not considered. I respect your abilities, and I will ensure your actions are recognized." Kale nodded, acknowledging the respect without arrogance. "Thank you, Your Highness. Recognition is not our goal. Cooperation and understanding are." Lithera's violet eyes softened further. "Then you have succeeded where many fail. You have not only achieved results but also changed perceptions. Humanity is different, and it is clear that difference carries power." Kyle left the chamber, his mind focused not on praise, but on the work ahead. The Velithian Empire was vast and complex, and humanity's place within it was just beginning to form, yet he knew that small victories, earned through patience, intelligence, and ethical action, were the foundation of lasting influence. The ripple of respect for humans continued to grow. Across the empire, whispers spoke of the human envoy who remained calm under insult, who excelled in complex challenges, and who negotiated with fairness and clarity. Lithera's acknowledgement had reinforced this perception, but Kale's true impact lay in the example he set. Humans could influence, adapt, and thrive not through domination, but through intelligence, observation, and moral strength. Kale's journey was far from over. Challenges would continue, negotiations would grow more complex, and the young heir would likely test him in new ways. Yet the turning point had been reached. Humans were no longer underestimated. They were recognized as capable, clever, and resilient, a species whose strength lay not only in technology or physical ability, but in intelligence, ethics, and the quiet power of patience. And somewhere, in the depths of the Velithian Empire, Lithra reflected on what she had learned. The young human envoy had not only proven himself, but had revealed a truth her culture often ignored: that true power was not always loud, flashy, or arrogant. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and principled, like the human before her. The stage was set for the final steps of Kale's mission. The respect he had. The halls of the Velithian orbital hub were alive with energy. Delegates from across the Empire moved quickly, their conversations filled with speculation and curiosity. Kyle, the human envoy, walked calmly through the corridors, his presence commanding quiet attention. The story of his accomplishments, his composure under insult, his intelligence in challenges, and his fairness in negotiations, had spread throughout the hub. Yet Kale thought little of his growing reputation. His focus remained on the mission, securing humanity's position in interstellar diplomacy and fostering cooperation that could benefit both humans and Velithians. Every step he took was measured, every decision deliberate. Humans did not act for glory. They acted for understanding, strategy, and the long-term good. Lithra observed him from the Grand Council chambers. The young royal heir had changed since their first encounter. Gone was the arrogance that had greeted Kale with insult. In its place was a mixture of respect, curiosity, and a subtle admiration that even she could not hide. The human had forced her to reconsider everything she thought she knew about humanity. Today, the two would meet for what was expected to be the final negotiation session, a chance to solidify the agreements that Kale had been working toward, and to establish humanity's formal place in Velithian interstellar politics. The chamber was large and opulent, with walls of crystal that reflected soft violet light. The Velithian court was assembled, including nobles, advisors, and a few skeptics who had yet to be fully convinced of humanity's capabilities. Lithra spoke first, her voice steady. "Human Kale, the Empire has observed your actions for weeks. You have proven capable in challenges, strategic in simulations, and fair in negotiations. Yet today, we finalize the agreements. Let us see if your actions can translate into lasting results." Kale inclined his head. "I am here to ensure that cooperation is beneficial to all parties, Your Highness. Humans act with fairness, clarity, and foresight." The session began with a review of prior negotiations. Kale had prepared meticulously. He presented data on trade routes, resource availability, and technological exchanges. Each point was carefully structured to highlight benefits for both humans and Velithians. Unlike most delegates, Kale avoided manipulation or exaggeration. He spoke with honesty, precision, and confidence. Some Velithian factions attempted to use the session to push their own agendas, presenting misleading information, or making demands that would skew the agreements in their favor. Kale countered tactfully. He questioned assumptions, presented evidence, and offered alternative solutions that satisfied multiple interests simultaneously. His approach was methodical, fair, and effective. As the hours passed, it became clear that Kale's influence was undeniable. Where others might have relied on dominance or intimidation, he relied on intelligence, strategy, and ethical reasoning. Slowly, consensus emerged. The agreements were balanced, equitable, and sustainable, a testament not only to Kale's skills but also to the unique qualities of humanity that he represented. Lithra watched silently, analyzing every move. Kale's calm demeanor, his patience, and his ethical approach left a deep impression. She realized that the human was not only a skilled envoy but also a reflection of an entire species' potential: clever, adaptable, resilient, and principled. Finally, after long hours of negotiation, the agreements were complete. Humans gained access to strategic mineral resources and advanced Velithian technology, while the Velithians secured cooperation that strengthened their own systems and stabilized internal politics. The outcome was historic, a mutually beneficial arrangement that surpassed expectations. Lithra rose and approached Kale. Her expression was composed, but her violet eyes held a rare warmth. "Human Kale," she said, her tone sincere. "You have done what few have accomplished. You negotiated with fairness, intelligence, and clarity. Your species has proven capable, not only in strategy, but in ethics, patience, and insight." Kyle inclined his head. "Thank you, Your Highness. Humanity seeks understanding and cooperation, not dominance or glory. We thrive through adaptation, observation, and principled action." For the first time, Lithra allowed herself a small smile. "You have earned respect, not through force or flattery, but through intellect, patience, and moral strength. I see now that humans are remarkable, and it is clear that your presence here has shifted perceptions across the Empire." The courtiers whispered among themselves. Many had doubted humanity, but Kale's actions had demonstrated the species' capacity for intelligence, strategic thinking, and ethical reasoning. Across the Velithian Empire, respect for humans grew. No longer were they considered primitive. They were seen as capable, clever, and resilient. As the session concluded, Kyle walked through the corridors of the hub one last time. He observed the interactions between Velithian nobles and envoys from other species. Everywhere, subtle changes were evident. Delegates treated humans with a mixture of caution and respect. Whispers of admiration followed Kale's steps, but he paid little attention. His mission was complete, not for personal gain, but for the benefit of his species. Later, in a private audience with Lithra, the young heir reflected on the journey. "You have taught me something important," she said softly. "We Velithians often rely on spectacle, arrogance, and pride. Yet your species demonstrates that true power lies in intelligence, patience, and ethical action. You have changed how I view humanity, and perhaps even how I view leadership itself." Kale's expression remained calm. Leadership and influence are built on trust, understanding, and integrity. Humans have learned that lasting impact comes not from domination, but from clarity, observation, and principled action. Lithra nodded. "I see now that your species possesses qualities that even we have overlooked. Perhaps humans are young in age, but they are ancient in wisdom." The acknowledgement marked a turning point. Humanity had secured not only practical agreements but also respect, a form of influence that could shape future relations across the galaxy. Kale had demonstrated that humans could thrive, not through aggression or arrogance, but through intelligence, ethics, and adaptability. In the following days, Kale oversaw the implementation of the agreements. Human engineers and scientists collaborated with Velithian specialists, exchanging knowledge and technology. Trade routes opened, resources were allocated fairly, and both species benefited. Everywhere, humans were recognized not only for their skills but for their principled approach. Lithra occasionally observed these interactions, her respect deepening. She had once viewed humans as insignificant, perhaps amusingly primitive. Now she recognized their potential and the quiet power that came from their unique qualities. In her eyes, Kale was no longer just a visitor. He was a representative of a species that had proven its worth to the galaxy. One evening, as Kale prepared to return to the Odyssey, Lithra approached him once more. "Human Kale," she said, her tone unusually gentle. "Your actions have reshaped perceptions, not only of your species, but of what leadership, diplomacy, and intelligence truly mean. You have earned respect, not through words or displays, but through consistent, principled action. That is something rare in any species, including my own." Kyle nodded, acknowledging her words without arrogance. Respect is earned through understanding, fairness, and action. Humans strive to embody these qualities. Lithera's violet eyes reflected a mix of admiration and contemplation. Then you have succeeded beyond expectation. Your species is remarkable, and your example will guide future relations for years to come. Thank you, human Kyle. Kyle left the chamber quietly, his mission complete. Across the Velithian Empire, the human envoy had left a lasting mark. Whispers of respect, curiosity, and acknowledgement of humanity's capabilities spread from the council halls to the corridors, reaching even the most distant sectors of the empire. As the Odyssey prepared for departure, Kale looked back at the Velithian orbital hub. He saw not just the grand architecture or the bustling activity, but the subtle changes he had helped create: respect for humans, recognition of intelligence and ethics, and the establishment of a foundation for future cooperation. He understood that this mission was not only about resources, trade, or diplomacy, it was about demonstrating the enduring qualities of humanity. Intelligence, resilience, moral clarity, and adaptability were traits that no insult, challenge, or obstacle could diminish. And somewhere in the depths of the empire, Lithera reflected on what she had learned. The human envoy had not only proven his own worth, but had revealed the potential of an entire species. Humans were not to be underestimated. They were capable, clever, and principled. Kyle's departure was quiet. No fanfare, no grand displays. He simply boarded the ship, his mission fulfilled. Humanity had earned respect, forged alliances, and demonstrated that true strength lay not only in power or technology, but in intelligence, patience, and ethical action. As the Odyssey lifted from the hub, Kale looked toward the stars. Humanity's journey among the stars had only begun, yet it had already made an indelible mark. The Velithians, and perhaps the wider galaxy, would remember the human envoy who refused to be insulted, who faced challenges with calm intellect, and who acted with integrity. Kale allowed himself a faint smile. The galaxy had begun to see humans, not as primitive but as remarkable, and he knew that,